All right, let's dive into one of the most fascinating and, frankly, explosive ideas in the history of politics. It comes from the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and it's a paradox that sounds completely bonkers at first, but it might just change how you think about freedom itself. So this is probably Rousseau's most famous line, right? He kicks off his masterpiece, The Social Contract, with this absolute bombshell. It's basically his diagnosis of, well, us, of humanity. We all start out with this birthright of total freedom, but somehow we all end up shackled. But what are these chains? And if we're all stuck in them, how do we ever get out? And this is where things get really wild. You'd think the answer is to just break the chains and run for the hills, right? But nope. Rousseau's answer sounds like he just wants to swap one set of chains for another. Being forced to be free. I mean, come on, that sounds like the very definition of tyranny. So stick with me here, because we're going to unpack this puzzle and figure out how on earth Rousseau connects a world in chains to a freedom that requires force. To get why Rousseau's cure is so shocking, you first got to understand what he thought the disease was. And for him, the disease was something that pretty much everyone else at the time was celebrating: progress. He was looking at the amazing advancements of the Enlightenment, all the science and art, and he saw something deeply wrong. You have to understand, this was a totally radical idea. All his peers, all the great thinkers of his day, were convinced that reason and science were pulling humanity into a golden age. But Rousseau, he comes out with his Discourse on the Arts and Sciences and makes this unbelievable claim that all this so-called progress was actually making us worse people, weaker, more corrupt, and less free. And this chart here just lays out his argument perfectly. On one side, you've got progress. For him, that meant luxury, and luxury leads to vanity and wanting more stuff. It teaches us to be polite instead of honest, which creates a society built on lies. On the other side, you have our natural state. It's simple, it's strong, it's honest. People were transparent with each other. And for Rousseau, that authenticity was the only foundation for real virtue and real freedom. All this criticism builds up to one of his most powerful metaphors, the idea that being civilized basically forces every single one of us to wear a mask. I love this quote because it shows Rousseau wasn't some romantic fool. He's not saying people were angels back in the day. He flat out says human nature wasn't any better. The huge difference was transparency. You could look at someone and know what they were about. You knew where you stood. There was a kind of safety in that raw honesty, a security that he believed our polished manners had totally wiped out. So what happens when you lose that transparency? You get what he called a vile and deceptive uniformity. Everybody acts the same, says the right things, but nobody dares to show who they really are. Sincere friendship is replaced by suspicion.